Welcome to Choose the Nickel. I am your host, George Bailey. My co-founder and technical support is the ever-talented, ever-beautiful Christina Bailey. This podcast is about giving kids financial freedom. My wife and I love our 4 children and want to learn to prepare them more effectively for the adult world. So we're interviewing fascinating people for their insights about how children learn to be financially savvy. Our guests come from diverse, sometimes conflicting schools of thought, and we love the opportunity to learn from them. We encourage listeners everywhere to weigh our guests' ideas on how best to cultivate in children a healthy relationship with money. We invite you to visit our blog at www.choosethenickel.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our efforts to apply what we are learning on the podcast. For this next episode, we're going to do something a little bit new. This interview marks the end of the first quarter of a year for Choose the Nickel, and we'd like to bring in a family member, which is why this episode will feature my big sister, Maureen Fox. Maureen is a wife of almost 26 years and a mother of 4. She hosts her own podcast, Misguided Mom, about her own experience as a parent. Maureen is also an RN, storyteller, crafter, traveler to faraway places, and professional buyer of stuff and sometimes seller of said stuff. Maureen is number 7 of 10 kids. On a side note, I'm the baby, but as she says, the oldest emotionally of the second half, of whom she did a lot of caretaking. She's a personal hero of mine, one of my absolute favorite conversation partners, and I love her a bunch. Ladies and gentlemen, Maureen Fox. Maureen Fox, welcome to the show.
George Bailey. George, is that your good ear? Or is that your bad ear? George Bailey, I love you till the day I die.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, so as I said in the bio, this is my sister, and full disclosure, so this is going to be a lot of fun. My first question for you, Maureen, is what are your favorite or just the professional accomplishments of which you are the most proud?
Well, George, it's a great question. The professional accomplishments that I am the most proud would definitely be becoming a nurse. I went back to school when I was, I think maybe 28, and went to nursing school, sold a house, moved back in with my parents, pregnant, had a second kid while I was in the middle of my second term of prerequisites. Graduated, before I did that, I got accepted to nursing school, graduated with highest honors with 2 kids. Then later on in 2012, went back and got my bachelor's degree, did my RN to BSN, and had 3 kids when I did that. Absolutely my greatest professional accomplishment, becoming a registered nurse with a bachelor's degree, because it just was like blood, sweat, and tears. A lot.
And those 3 kids, they were all boys.
They were all boys, which made it even harder. No, I don't know. Who knows?
Who knows?
I know.
It's funny because we have these ideas about it would be so much easier if I had girls or boys or whatnot, but really we don't know. And you have the kids that you have, and you have to just deal with them as they come.
That is so true, honestly. And it's all relative, and each kid brings with him or her their own set of difficulties. I mean, definitely there's something to say for the level of emotion, but my last kid is a very emotional kid. And so I feel like I'm raising a girl, frankly. No, don't tell him that. Terrible.
We have that. That was
clearly a boy so far, but in this day and age, you never know. So it's all good.
All right.
I just want to say, just for the record, since I already put it out there, I would love him however he came to me.
That's great. That's great. I want to know about you as a kid. And I know a little bit about you as a kid, but I have some very interesting questions that I've saved for you. For example, I know that you have a podcast, and I listened to your first episode, loved it. I thought it was really fun to hear you talk about what it is that drives you. And your podcast is, I'm going to say it wrong. Say the name of your podcast.
Oh, great. It's like that name. I'm a nurse, and of course I already said that. And when we call people, I work in urgent care, and we'll call a name. And my favorite is when I call the name of a kid and the parent, the idiot responsible for giving that kid the name, has to correct my pronunciation, because then I just think way to go. Good job. You had a lot of options, like almost an infinite number of them. And you chose the spelling of like Jackwell to be, something completely just random. And we're all supposed to figure it out. So it's
Mrs. Guided Mom. So
that's right. MRS.
Guided Mom.
Right.
All one word. And so I was listening to Mrs. Guided Mom.
Misguided.
Yeah.
Say it again, George.
Misguided Mom.
Okay, good.
Okay. My question for you is, you said in there, I'm the only kid out of all of my siblings who can really dance. And I'm not arguing that question at all, actually. That claim is actually quite valid. Where my question is where did that come from?
Oh, George, I got to tell you, I can't give the answer without being offensive. I honestly think I was switched at birth, and
I actually think you were too. They all told me that it was me that was switched at birth. But
you in as well.
Maybe.
I mean, we were a total like ragtag bunch. It could have happened. Especially with you, unfortunately.
Yes. Okay.
No, I don't know where it came from. I do think that every single member of our family has rhythm because they're all musicians. But I think that I happen to get that physical rhythm gene. Part of it too is not just about like, okay, so I just want to say that I know there are people listening right now that are like, oh, she thinks she can dance. But I'm just going to say, consider it Broughton, because I can seriously bring it. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no. And for the listener, I've seen it. I've watched Maureen dance, and I've watched her dance with other people who can dance, and Maureen can dance. This is a real thing. But what makes it so interesting is that none of the other Baileys can.
Well, and
maybe a little bit. We're not totally inept, but I would say that you're on a different level.
Right. Like Abby can hold her own at a wedding. She does pretty well. She's got her couple of moves. Laura too, probably. I mean, everybody kind of has a couple of moves. And Ross, surprisingly, has been doing this ballroom thing and he's really been getting into it.
Oh, I know.
But after like the funk and hip hop stuff, I can't even talk about it. I love it so much. And I wanted to dance in high school. But honestly, unfortunately, I guess I didn't want to be known as one of those girls because those particular girls maybe were known for other things. And so I just thought I couldn't do it. There's also a part of me that I just have never taken myself too seriously. I mean, I was elected like most spirited and class clown at one point. And so I think then going out and just having that total like dance face, I could never have done that. So, it all worked out. I taught jazzercise. Yeah. Yeah. And now I dance almost every day for exercise and it's a blast and I totally enjoy it. I do not know how no one else got that.
Other things that in my mind, when I was a kid watching you set you apart from my other siblings. One big thing at least was that you had real drive in sports.
Yeah.
And I loved watching that. I certainly had very little drive in sports. I did a little bit of baseball, but I mean, you were into volleyball and, you were out being just active and everything like that. Again, do you remember anything about what really drove you?
Well, I really loved athletics. I really loved them. And my first stint into sports was playing softball, which I actually really disliked, just to be clear. I totally disliked it. And so when I discovered volleyball, that was kind of the thing. I played soccer for 2 years. I was a goalie and I broke my arm, unfortunately, so that didn't work out.
Yeah.
But on a really incredible save. Let's just put it that way. So
it was not inglorious.
It was not inglorious. As a soccer goalie, actually, I got all league honorable mention, which just sounds a little embarrassing at some level because, then it's like she's special and gets all league honorable mention. But actually, I think it was because I had very little experience playing, but my volleyball playing really lent itself to being a goalie. But I was never the very best. I was good, but I was not the very, very best. I had big dreams. But then I got married at 19 and all of my dreams were squashed.
Sorry, I'm laughing.
I mean, most of my dreams, all of my athletic dreams for sure.
Okay, gotcha.
Not every dream, but quite a few.
Quite a few. I was thinking about, when it came to me in sports, I always got dishonorable mention. It wasn't official. It was just, that was the way it was.
Mention.
Yeah. The Johnsons, our friends, when we were growing up, Kathy Johnson would always call me Spaghetti Arm George or Spaghetti.
Oh my gosh. I'm bringing it back.
Well, that's what this is for. And so, oh yeah.
Spaghetti Arm George.
And it's true. I could not shut a van door. Okay. And that was why, cause I was too timid. I thought like, what if I shut my arm in there and it, comes off, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
But I want to bring it back. And the reason why is because I want to know about you as a kid and money.
Right.
I love this other stuff, but what I really want to know is because I'm on my own, quest to understand how I learned about money and how it's influenced me, how my childhood's influenced me, and maybe undoing some of those things and strengthening some of the other things that I learned that were good lessons. I want to know what your lessons were, your first memories of work. Tell me, what was the first time you remembered actually having a job as a kid?
Well, I want to back it up a little bit, okay? Because the first thing I want to say is that coming from a big family, we didn't have, and maybe some big families out there do this, but we didn't have what is that called when you get?
Allowance.
Yeah, we didn't have an allowance. That's exactly.
I knew it. You know how I knew it? Because I didn't have it.
Yeah. And so we never had an allowance. And because we never had an allowance, and also I think because we were about a mile and some change from the closest store, I don't remember needing money. I have my kids, I had one kid that loved money. I have one kid that really, it still loves money and was always looking for a way to make money. But part of this is that today, you can buy something for your game online. So there's always an opportunity to buy. But when I was little, those opportunities were totally and completely dependent on how much money Ross had. Because if Ross had money, which he often did, and hid in a drawer, then I had money because I would steal Ross's money.
I had no idea.
George.
I did not know this. I didn't know that. Well, if
so
I had known where Ross's drawer was, I would have been in there. He was in my bedroom,
Right. So the typical thing would be Isaac, and I feel like it may have been me that instigated it, but Isaac for sure, because we all know it was Isaac who probably instigated it. So we would find money from Ross, thanks Ross. And we would take, and it took, my gosh, it was it took so little to,
get a package of Now and Laters for 15 cents.
Yeah. And so we would walk up to East Hills or we would walk down to Moon's. Yeah. East Hills was a little safer and a little less sketchy, but that never seemed to, matter.
Yeah.
Right. And for $1, you could get one of the mini sodas. You could get Hostess snowballs. That was what I loved. And then you could get Jolly Rancher sticks, which they don't sell anymore, but they used to sell the Jolly. I know everybody's like, oh, the Jolly Rancher sticks, and then, or a really long, foot-long gum. I would take that. We would walk home, and on the trip home, I would just spend that time just putting more of the gum in my mouth. So by the time I got home, I had all of the gum in my mouth, But we would buy, we would just get this hoard of junk, then maybe walk up to the park or walk back home or the school or something, and we would enjoy our treasure trove of junk food. And so that was kind of my memory of money, was stealing money from Ross to buy treats.
Where was Ross getting money?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's actually the questions we should be asking. That's the one, because that's where the dishonesty probably was. Don't have your stupid money at the top of your drawer.
Oh, this is so typical. You're putting the blame on the victim. It's totally.
But so what I would say about my early earning, there was only one way I liked to earn money. How about that?
Yeah.
Let's start with the ways I hated to earn money. I hated earning money by folding patterns. Yet now I can see that was actually just super easy. Mom and dad had that business. Well, mom did, she still does. But I remember, as you do, that we could earn a certain amount of money for every 50 patterns folded, because she had these doll patterns and she would sell them and somebody had to fold them. And so I do remember like folding patterns. I also hated babysitting. I can't quite describe my loathing for babysitting. I don't know how I did it with my own kids. Okay. But, it's amazing they survived, but I really hated babysitting for a lot of reasons. It was just an uncomfortable situation. I didn't like being in other people's homes like that. I didn't like watching the kids. I didn't typically like the kids. I had some really weird babysitting experiences, so it just was not my favorite at all, ever. But my favorite way, absolute favorite, was cleaning. And so I would hire myself out for like $12 an hour or $10 an hour, and I would clean. And I cleaned for a woman, Cecil Hunsinger, and she had this big, incredible home filled with the most beautiful things, and I loved cleaning her house. And I would go probably twice a month, I think, and clean her house. And I was good at it, which you would never have known at home.
Yeah.
But I would go clean her house. Well, then from her, I got other jobs cleaning, and I ended up cleaning for her son who lived in Oakland. And I was cleaning his artist studio loft, literally right off of, and it wasn't right off, actually, it was like a quarter mile from the West Oakland BART station, which if you know anything about BART, if you've ever taken BART, then you know that West Oakland, like the actual West Oakland BART station, is right in the middle of the project. So I would take BART into West Oakland, and then I would walk under the freeway to his loft, and then I would clean, get back on BART, and go home. Well, Dad found out that I was going there and put the kibosh on that. So he was so appalled that I was taking BART to West Oakland and getting off in the projects, walking under the freeway. And honestly, it was probably not the safest place for me to be, but
neither was Moons. Neither was Moons.
Yeah, it was terrible. There were a lot of unsafe places, I'll tell you that much. But I loved earning my money through cleaning. I could put music on. I still love cleaning. And then my very first real job, like W-2 earning job, was as a lifeguard, actually. I worked at a pool, neighborhood pool, where I checked people in. But that led me to lifeguard training, and then I worked for the Hayward Parks and Rec Department as a lifeguard.
I remember that. And that's so weird, because you said that and I thought, like, I haven't thought about that forever.
But those lifeguarding skills and first aid skills really, and I always had a love of science. My greatest inspiration actually was, there were two teachers, Miss Ellis and Miss Volek. Both of them were really sarcastic and snarky.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I became the TA for Volek my senior year. And that's where I really was like, I want to be just like her, because man, she could lay out a kid in seconds flat. And I just thought, that's a skill I want. I want to be able to just say something just so witty. So she was really, she inspired me, but I wanted to either be a science teacher or a doctor. And so when I know I was joking about having my dream squashed, but when I got married so young, I actually remember thinking, well, now I'm married. I can't be a lifeguard anymore, because that's a job like not for a married woman. So I went to bank teller training school and got my certification as a bank teller, which I only liked occasionally. I mean, I like the people part of it. I've always been a people person, but two stories with that. The first was I was working in Albany near Berkeley, California, a World Savings Bank. A guy walked in and passed me a note, and it said, I need a money order for like $250 or something, right? And of course, at bank teller training school, we talk about the whole note being passed is usually not a good sign. And so I remember standing there thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's going to rob his bank. So he passes the note. I need a money order for $250. My manager actually saw it, comes over and was like, how's everything going? Can I help you? Does anybody need any help? And so I showed her the note, and we're like, all right. So we process it. Guy leaves. Well, that night, not kidding, that night, maybe the night after, but it was like my husband, Christian, he and I were watching television, and America's Most Wanted comes on. And they did an update because they had captured this guy. He was wanted on America's Most Wanted for the murder of his girlfriend and his girlfriend's lover. And he had come in and purchased a money order by passing a note. Like, who does? Just a note, pun intended, to everybody out there. Don't pass notes at the bank. It's just bad form. Unless you don't have speaking skills, I guess. But
wow. I had no idea. I had no idea.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember watching and I was like, oh my gosh, I sold the money order to that guy.
It's your claim to fame. Every dog has his 15 minutes.
That was fun. But the second one was I worked at the Oakland Municipal City Credit Union. And that was my first, like, I felt like a real professional. So I was 19, maybe I just turned 20. I actually went to mom and said, I got this job. I have no clothing that will work because I was a lifeguard and a jock. So my like business outfit was a pair of Gap women's boxer shorts. So I wore boxer shorts, Birkenstocks, and a white V-neck tee every day. And so I was like, I got nothing. I got no clothes. So mom, I think I painted a hallway and she took me out shopping as payment, got some adult, very conservative, probably extremely unattractive suit type of stuff. So I would put on my tennis shoes on top of my nylons. I would take the bus down to the BART station, take the BART train into Oakland and work at that credit union and then, reverse it. And I remember feeling very cosmopolitan doing that. I know, but I got
but here I have to laugh because I know that it took so little for me to feel cosmopolitan.
Well, I guess
because we were so.
I mean, I was a kid. I was casual. I mean, I had like neck scarves and everything. It was very. Yeah. I got fired though. I got fired because there had been some big thing where some warehouse had been broken into and these checks had been stolen, and I cashed a stolen check. And so they fired me. But I think they fired me because I didn't fit in. I'm not kidding. Yeah. I don't think I fit
in a bank, Maureen?
I did not fit in a bank in a professional environment like that.
For me, it's hilarious because I work in the financial services and I'm kind of like a salamander because I don't think I belong at all. But I love it. I love being there, like, watching people talk about money. But to me, it's more or less a joke. But I love it. So I get it.
Yeah. Well, I want to know why it's a joke, though. Explain that to me.
Because looking at our background, not just my background, but yours and mine.
It's more like I have no business being here because I know nothing about this.
Exactly. Now, and I've learned a lot, and I've learned from some of the very best, and I feel like my confidence has gone up and all, and I have this passion, hence this podcast. But what I want to know from you is, during your childhood, what really shaped the way that you felt about money? When do you think you started making kind of an adjustment to feeling confident? Because I'm assuming when I say that you may not have been confident at some time.
Oh no, actually what's interesting about that was that, as you remember, it's so different from the way my own kids were raised. If my child came home and said, Mom, I need a new pair of Vans, I would just be like, well, let me see these ones. Okay. Are they fit? Are they too small? All right, well, we'll go to the mall. We'll go get you Vans. But that didn't exist. I very rarely asked for anything, at least that I remember. So this would be what I would say would shaped my feelings about or ideas about money. Christmas was massive, so massive. I mean, I literally remember, and of course I was small, but I remember having difficulty like walking through the front door because of the presents. They were just everywhere. And mom would go overboard. Now, of course, I know a little bit more having talked to her as an adult about that she would do all kinds of these bazaars and little craft shows and stuff to make money for Christmas. But they also would go into Hawk for Christmas. And then we would always have to go on like church assistance in January to recover from Christmas. So that's the first thing. The second thing was that mom would come home. She would make a lot of money on some gig. She would come home cash rich. So she would have a lot of cash and checks. And then we would go to the grocery store and buy food. And then it was always like Oreos and ice cream and just tons and tons and tons of food. I remember that. So what I remember about mom and dad and money was money came in and then money quickly went out. That's what I remember. I remember Isaac getting into a car accident and then dad and Isaac and I, for some reason, going to some shady office building and dad getting insurance. I'm sure post-dating it or predating it. Mom and dad's philosophy on money, and probably, unfortunately, if mom's listening to this, she's not going to deny it, but her current on money.
we know, and I've talked to mom and just been like, hey, none of this is meant to diss you. We love mom. Our dad has passed away 12 years ago.
Yeah, you're always responding to an emergency.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that. And so when I started making money, I started saving money. But ironically, dad was the one, when I turned 18, he was the one who came to me and said, I'm going to give you some advice. And this is the advice, which is get a credit card and buy one thing and then pay it off. And then when you're done buying that, buy something else smaller. So I got a credit card. I bought a bike, paid the bike off. And that was the most genius advice because it was the thing that created credit for me. That's how I got credit. I mean, that was the best advice because I didn't even know, I didn't realize. Whereas like, say, my oldest kid really struggled getting credit, and my credit score is like 830 or something. It's insane. I have a great credit score. So for me, as money came in, I would save that money and then I would save it for things that I wanted to buy. But I had expensive tastes. And so I think that was tricky, which is very different. I still have expensive tastes, but I buy very differently now, of course. So I think that's probably the way it shaped me.
Did you later on have any sort of epiphanies about how money works and how business works, how work works, all that?
The only epiphanies I would say is that I prefer having an employer with a 401k plan. I like a paycheck. And that my husband, who I would have never have thought to be money wise, is actually really good with money. And he's basically the one that's driven our retirement. You know, for me, I was just like, give me the paycheck and take a little bit out and put it in that 401k, and I don't want to talk about it. But for Christian, he's the one who's pulled all of our money from one place and put it in with this other. We have a financial advisor and investor, and it's a little bit on the, not risky, but it's, what is that, more aggressive side.
Yeah, you're younger. You want to be more aggressive. I understand that.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So he's all on that. And he's been amazing. Christian struggled so much with providing for our family for so many years. But once he started his business, he's just been, I've been just absolutely and completely impressed with his ability to pay off of all of his debt. I mean, we liquidated everything to start this business, and he has paid us back. All of our retirement had been liquidated. All of that's been paid back. All of the, he'll buy a vehicle, and then in the beginning it would freak me out. And now I'm like, well, I guess if you can afford it and you're going to pay it off. And then he does. So he's just amazing with his money. I guess in some ways I revert back to being like kind of more like mom and dad a little bit. I have to be careful because I'm really good with money for the most part, but I'm better with money when I have to be conscious about it.
Yeah.
It's a little tougher the less conscious I have to be about it.
Well, I know for myself, for example, that I don't like spending money and I don't make super expensive purchases. But at the same time, I think that my confidence level was pretty shot for a while. And then, I started coming into my own. And again, I'm not trying to knock mom or dad, but, we had a rough time with money growing up. And I'm learning now how to balance those things. This is a passion that I care about a lot. And you do learn with time. And the wonderful thing is we do need to be very meticulous about who we choose as a spouse or a lifelong partner, because that can have a huge impact. And I think that it's great that Christian brings that to the table. Christina brings a lot of wisdom to the table and is not a big spender. And I'm always very grateful for that.
Right.
Now,
but I don't like being cheap either, though. That's part of it. Is like,
definitely.
Christian has, like, I have expensive tastes, nothing compared to him. He's definitely got expensive tastes. But at the same time, too, there's something to say for enjoying your money a little bit as well.
Yeah. But you have to be kind of in a place where everything is steady, where you can really derive that enjoyment, or that you
budget the enjoyment.
Yeah, you budget the enjoyment. I think that is right. Now, in terms of parenting advice, and this is, I'm going back to Misguided Mom. You love giving out parenting advice, but you have kind of a humble, humorous approach to that. I like that because you recognize that, no kids are the same. Basically, I could tell you how to raise your child, but I'm probably wrong or whatever. I like I think it very refreshing. But do you have any advice on how to teach your kids about money and business, how to prepare them for the professional world?
The first thing is that I would say is that anything I've learned about parenting, I learned by accident or watching like my sister, Abby, because she kind of did it before we all did it. But as far as money is concerned, I went back and forth on the whole allowance thing. And then the honest truth is that I just could never be consistent. So I just don't do an allowance. And then I began to really feel like, I don't owe you anything. You're lucky you live here. Like I'm giving you a house and I'm feeding you and you got new shoes for when school starts. And so my basic philosophy on like kid needs living in my house are I provide you a home that is, warm and clean. I provide you with food. I provide you with equipment and supplies and resources that you need to go to school. and everything else I could care less about. And then I reserve Christmas and birthdays for the purchase of those things that one of my top strengths from, Strengths Finder is strategy. And so I was always very strategic about the purchase of stuff. And so by say September, I would say, okay, we're going to go back to school shopping. Kid wants a new backpack. And I would say, well, I'm sorry, but I bought you. I mean, it was never, I'm sorry. They were forewarned. This is the backpack I'm buying you for the beginning of your 6th grade year, and it's going to last you through all of middle school. So choose wisely. But then I would get a good backpack. This is the backpack for all of high school. I will not be replacing this backpack. If you would like a different backpack, it's totally up to you. But then there are certain things I wouldn't, I don't skimp on as much. I would supply the necessities. I typically was able to, because I have boys, and this is an easier thing with boys, is I was usually able to take care of all of those shopping needs at the beginning of the school year, and then a little bit of supplementing at Christmas time. But then I would strategize, and if a kid asked me for something by September, I would be like, well, Christmas is 4 months away, so I don't buy presents now. Because anything you want, this goes on your Christmas list now. And then post-Christmas, it would be like, well, your birthday's coming up in a couple of months. So that's a great, I still do this. Sam, will ask me for something and I'm like, well, your birthday's coming up. Is that what you want? But I'm also very generous at times too. When I bought Thomas a professional drum kit for Christmas, but I knew that it was like, this is going to be worth the money that I spend. He's going to use it forever. And he has. And so is John. So I don't really believe in an allowance. I think that kids should be helping. My kids probably don't help as much as they should, like most kids.
Well,
but I definitely,
but those are two separate issues though. And one is, the allowance is kind of like your grace giving. There's and then there is the matter of, do I pay my kid to work? And I'm not settled on either of those questions. Part of what I'm doing right now is exploring where I find myself. Well,
I'll tell you what, if my kid comes up to me and says, cause I don't know that I'm doing this right. That's why it's called misguided mom, that I have no idea. And if I did it right, it was purely by chance and luck. But if a kid comes to me and says, Mom, I want to earn some extra money, then that's when I'll start putting a price on jobs. Then that's when I'll be like, all right, so cleaning out the refrigerator, is that worth $1 to you? $2. All right, $2 for cleaning out the refrigerator, something like that. But as far as giving an allowance, I mean, nobody's given me an allowance. You know what I'm saying? Every penny that I have, I've earned. And so I understand the flip side of that, which is that it helps them to understand how to budget. But the honest truth is that I would way rather, this is just me, I would way rather have my kids say, I know we don't have any money, which is what all my kids have said. Growing up, they would say, well, I know we don't have any money. And I wouldn't correct them. I wouldn't say actually, we're just fine.
Let's sit down and have a talk about a 401k.
I guess I kind of was okay with them, their perspective being that we were broke, because then they wouldn't ask for things. And then they were always okay with the sales stuff. What's really interesting about this is that John, who's my money guy, he likes having money. John makes good money. He saves his money. He buys. He likes to save and then spend, but he also managed to pay off a bunch of debt. He's a mechanic. He's purchased all of his tools. And for those of you out there maybe who are familiar with that, when you go get hired on at a shop, they don't provide you with anything except maybe they'll loan some things to you while you get, up and started. You have to have your own rolling toolbox. Those things are very expensive, very expensive. And so the Snap-on guy comes or the Makita guy comes with their tool truck. They sell to you on credit and then you're paying them off. Well, John's paid off all of his debts. He has all of the tools that he needs. And John has some very nice things and he takes care of his things. He has 2 white t-shirts. He's like, Mom, how do I really wash a white t-shirt? I've had these for 2 years. I want them to last. I'm like, my gosh, this is the kid. I love this kid, John was always resourceful. I never gave John any money. Okay. I never did, for good reason. And John did a lot of drugs and sold a lot of drugs. And when this is what's beautiful about it though, is that he was so resourceful. He would sell belongings and use that money. And the kid learned how to be resourceful. So I kicked him out when he was 18 and I was terrified of kicking him out. And I thought that he was going to end up on the street. I think that's the big fear with parents in this kind of situation. And if this is about money, I think this is important because John ended up rooming with a bunch of other guys. And that worked out really well for him. And then the guys all kind of left him in the lurch and left him with the bill. He ended up everybody else moved out of his apartment. He ended up being on his own there, and it ended up costing him a couple $1,000s breaking the lease. And yeah, so it was a really big deal. And this was a kid that was working at Arby's. So John is absolutely one of the most resourceful people I've ever met. But I will tell you that had I given him money, it wouldn't have turned out this way. He's completely financially self-reliant just through hard work. Now he wants to go to school. His body's hurting a little bit from working on cars. He knows that I'll be there for him if he needs me to be there, but I don't bail him out. I think that this is one of the mistakes that parents make, is that we bail our kids out too soon. And don't get me wrong, it's terrifying. I mean, I literally, at one point he called me sobbing and he said, this was actually when all of this was happening. He says, I have no place to go. I need to come home. And I thought, no, we are not ready for that. We're just recovering from having him, be here, living here. As much as my mother heart wanted so badly to say yes, I also knew that, his dad would absolutely refuse it. I actually called a friend of mine who had lived on the street she was a junkie, had been hooked on heroin and meth, and called her up. And it's like, what kind of circles am I running in? My gosh. And I know. And I talked to her and I was in tears, and I just thought, I have no option. I have to let this kid come home. And she just reassured me and said, Maureen, he will not end up on the street. He's resourceful. He'll be okay. And I had to call him back and say no. And it was literally like having my heart cut out of my chest. But you know what? That kid figured it out, and we have figured it out. He and I have had a lot of healing. I paid for him. All of it, all of his costs included. I paid for him, took him to Africa, and we had 3 weeks together. So again, it's not that I won't invest in the lives of my children. I don't want that I don't want it to come across like I'm cruel. It's just that I need those kids. I need that kid specifically to learn the life lessons he needs to learn, because he was the kid that always asked for things. He was constantly asking for things. It was insatiable, and I felt like had I given in, there would have been no end. And the fact that I had enough wherewithal to know that is just purely, as far as I'm concerned, it was just purely by chance. I like to say I can't take responsibility for any of it, because if I take responsibility for the good, then I got to take responsibility for the bad. So
it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah, I'm avoiding that responsibility.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that's a lot of TMI. That's a little bit deeper, But, George, I've got this other kid who's 19, kind of similar. No, very, very, actually very different teen years. But he went up to go to college, and he's living, on his own. Same kind of thing where I thought, okay, I'll pay for your tuition, but you're responsible for the rest. And it's a good state college, and the price is right. It's not terrible. And he moved in with somebody, and he contacted me at the end of his first semester, and he said, I don't want to go to school anymore. And of course, I had to have that whole conversation. But in the end, he actually said, the truth is, Mom, I know what I want to do, and I just don't want to waste your money. And, I appreciated that. Because there's a lot of kids that will go and they'll fail and they won't say anything because the pressure to succeed is so strong. And then they fail. I mean, I know people personally who had big college savings funds that were completely blown within the first year of their kids going to school. And I was just really grateful that for whatever reason, this kid was able to say, I don't want to waste your money.
Wow. Yeah. And that's very mature.
Yeah.
I agree. No, and I love these stories. I really appreciate it. It's not easy. And I think that one of the things that we underestimate is this very strange dynamic that money introduces into the relationship, even between, of course, between spouses, but even between mother and son, father, daughter, however you want to put it. My last question for you, what is your very favorite charitable cause?
My favorite charitable cause is any charitable cause that is ethical, sustainable, and does no harm to the population that it's serving. So for me, I had an opportunity to go to Africa in 2014 for my clinical hours doing my RN to BSN program. I went through one organization and I really liked the way that they were organized. But I have since developed just my own opinions on humanitarian medical work or services in third world countries. I'm not completely sure that it's sustainable. I'm not quite sure that it fits, that it checks all three of those boxes for me anymore. And so I personally won't participate anymore, only because I feel we need to deal with root cause instead of Band-Aids. And we also need to be utilizing local expertise, local nurses, local doctors. But in that trip, I had an opportunity. I was in Kenya. I just went my 5th time. And on my 4th trip, I had an opportunity to go and visit another nonprofit organization in Uganda. It's just how I guess it's pronounced by Kenyans. Yeah, Uganda. This was an organization that was co-founded by a woman named Heidi Coulter and then our niece, Eleanor Cox. Ellie did the fundraising for it while Heidi was on the ground organizing it in Uganda. I was able to go really get a good bird's eye, view of the work they were doing. And so far, that organization checks all three of those boxes. And so just to put the plug out there, it's called Peace for Paul, P-E-A-C-E, and then F-O-R-P-A-U-L. Everybody goes to Africa, comes back and says, I'm going to start a nonprofit. Don't do it. My gosh, throw your weight behind one that already exists. And there are a lot of good ones. But
I love that you say that. And I think that one of the things that all of us has to learn, where are our resources best utilized?
Right.
And that doesn't always mean that we have to be the founders of the next big
organizer.
thing. Each of us has some sort of skill, a way to contribute to making the world a better place. We have to understand what that is. And there may already have been somebody who's been out there and done that. And yeah, I agree with you I love what Peace for Paul is doing. So proud of my niece who started that organization when she was 18, 19? I mean, she was really young.
Well, I think it's been 8 years. So yeah, I think she was in her early 20s, but the co-founding of it with Heidi and what do
they do though? I mean, give us a description because we need to know what they do.
Well, first of all, there are nonprofits, not NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And then there are Christian charitable organizations. Then there are governmental organizations like UNICEF and the World Health Organization. And each country has their own, USAID and stuff like that. Usually the difference between them is their end goal, right? Oftentimes these involve either working with women who are sex trafficked or working with populations of children. And they're doing that through orphanages, right? I don't know a ton. I just know what I've experienced going to Africa, going to these 2 countries in Africa, frankly. The Christian charitable organizations, often their goal is ministry. Sometimes it's ministry through teaching. Sometimes it's ministry through medicine. Now, some of these organizations will go into a country in the middle of a crisis and they'll help stabilize it. That's a very different thing to me, right, than going in and working as a nurse at a pop-up clinic. When you're going in after an earthquake or something like that, I think that that's a really worthy cause.
All hands on deck.
All hands on deck. So with all of that, right, Peace for Paul is an organization that is focused on children. And it was founded because Heidi met a group of children, gave them some food, and this one child came back and said thank you. When he came back, she had this immediate and initial, very spiritual connection to him, and then founded this organization based on his story. And it's a common story. I don't care where you are, but it's usually an exploited people or a tribe or a caste. Oftentimes these folks are undereducated. Many times, like in the case of Paul, where he comes from the Kirimajong tribe, they don't have a written language. So they are displaced from their lands. They're typically people like nomadic people or people who are herders, things like that. And they're pushed off of their land and they're pushed into the cities. And they go into the cities and they can't work. Nobody will hire them. Then you have a lot of children. You have a lot of HIV AIDS killing off the adult population. You have a lot of children that are raising themselves. And so that's kind of typically where these organizations seem to start. With Peace for Paul, they created the orphanage. It's fairly typical in that their goal is to secure and maintain the education for these kids, get them to a point where they graduated from secondary school or high school, and that they then have not just the opportunity, it's actually part of their program. In order to stay in the program, they have to do some kind of an internship or go to school. Could be a technical training or actual, degree program. And then they kind of help to stabilize them and get them ready to move into adult life. And the goal, of course, is that these kids that are almost primarily Kirimajong would then come back and help their own tribes people in similar situations. So,
I love that.
So they stay within their community, the circle of life kind of thing. So the thing I really like about Peace for Paul is that oftentimes these organizations will they're building schools or they're doing medical clinics or things like that. But Peace for Paul doesn't really have that focus. What they have is a farm, and it's 3 acres, I believe. It's right on the Nile River. It's beautiful, and it's completely covered in all kinds of incredible, fruits and vegetables. It's run by a man named Moses. His wife, Olivia, she runs the orphanage. Their goal is to create a self-sustaining orphanage program where the orphanage is run. There has to be some funding coming in from the West, that it's also sustained by the money that they make from the farm. So that's a kind of a cool thing. And then all of the kids at a certain age, they go and they work on the farm. They learn about working on the farm. It's a really great program worthy of support. The difference between what I'm talking about here, where there are these organizations doing the work on the ground, there are also organizations that bring people in to foreign countries to do, quote, humanitarian service. The term that I like to use is voluntourism. Or humanitarian tourism, which if you look it up, actually.
No, that's a term. That's a thing.
Right, it is. And it means basically that you're going to a location for vacation, but you're also doing some service while you're there. And obviously, that's a whole mixed bag. Again, you could be involved in an organization that is really good at what they do. They do what they say they're going to do. Local people actually benefit from it. And then obviously you can have organizations that are doing it because they're making a lot of money off of it. The rule of thumb, actually, I read this just recently, and it makes a lot of sense to me, is if you are looking for an opportunity to go and serve and you go online and you start searching out sites, the sites that look like the most fun are going to be the ones that benefit the community they're serving the least.
When they're telling you, hey, working on an orphanage is fun.
Yeah. There's always opportunities.
Should be a hit.
Yeah, exactly.
This place that is just miserable for the children.
Oh my gosh, that takes me actually. When I was in Uganda last summer, the thing that was killing me, and this is again just to put a plug in there for Pepsi Cola. I want to rethink this one. They had these billboards everywhere. The billboard said something like "Pepsi, live your life now" or something, and I just thought, what? Like, live your life now? Because tomorrow you're going to starve to death.
I have another one for if one of the really fun looking one is like, come join our leper colony. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, no, you get the picture. Well, hey, we got to wrap it up. But,
yeah, we do.
Love you lots. And this was really fun. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, George, I'm really excited about what you're doing. I think this is great stuff. And thank you so much for thinking of me and for having me on the show.
Everybody else, thank you for listening. We hoped you enjoyed the interview and found useful ideas about things you can do with your kids. Be sure to check the show notes at www.choosethenickel.com for links to names, books, and other resources we discussed in today's show. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter and visit our contact page where you can give us feedback. We invite you to share Choose the Nickel with your friends and join us in our quest to give kids financial freedom.